Millionaire visits mother he abandoned years ago. When they meet, she calls the police on him. This son abandoned his mother with good intentions years ago, trying to achieve his goal. He started a successful business, became a millionaire, and reached his destination. But when he returned to his mother, she immediately called the police on him because this kind of behavior was unacceptable to her. Oliver just finished school and was still living with his mother. One day, he was awakened by his mother's screams and rushed downstairs. Someone stole our painting. Hazel yelled when Oliver arrived in the living room. He looked at the empty wall, not knowing the vast impact this moment would have on his life. "We have to call the police," Oliver said when he snapped out of his daze. After the call was made, they could hear the sirens coming increasingly closer, and a few minutes later, the police arrived. Oliver and Hazel were unaware this wouldn't be the last time the police would come here. The police didn't find any evidence and found it weird that only one of the two paintings was stolen. And it became even more curious when an expert came by. It turned out the remaining painting was at least 3 times more valuable. Were they lucky or someone playing dirty? With no leads to follow and no evidence that Oliver or Hazel played dirty, the case turned cold quickly. But Hazel couldn't accept this. Oliver noticed his mother took the loss heavily. He knew her grandfather painted the painting, which meant a lot to her. So there was one thing he could do. "I will bring it back," Oliver told his mother one night. He had thought about it for weeks and finally decided to leave his childhood home to try and get the painting back. His hunt took days, which turned into weeks, months, and years, unaware of the surprise he would get when he returned. "This won't do," Oliver mumbled after collecting another lousy paycheck from some odd job. He needed sufficient funds to fund his search, so he started a company. After a while, his business started booming, and he earned more than enough to support his investigation. It all seemed hopeless until finally, years after leaving his mother's house, something truly promising popped up after following bad lead after bad lead. "Come on, this is the one. I can feel it." He talked himself in some confidence, waiting for the knock on the door, not knowing that it would change his entire life. "Where is he?" Oliver mumbled frustratingly. He made an appointment with a source who had some information. Finally, he exclaimed while opening the door, but when the source told him what he knew, Oliver forgot his frustration. "They're going to auction it?" He asked, wondering if he heard correctly. "Yes, an auction of the painting you described," the source confirmed, but Oliver's happiness turned back into frustration instantly. "I don't know where it is, though," the source said. "You don't know," Oliver said with a sigh. He ran his hands through his hair and grabbed his phone to contact every source he knew, until one of his contacts, who is frequently active on the black market, heard something about an auction tonight. "This can't be a coincidence," Oliver mumbled as he asked for the details. When he got the address, Oliver rushed over and arrived at a warehouse on the dock. But when he tried to enter, something happened. He felt a hand on his shoulders right before he pushed the door open. "What's the password, mate?" a low voice said. Oliver turned around and gulped when he saw the man the hand belonged to. The man was enormous and was obviously tasked to guard the entrance. How could Oliver get past him? Password," Oliver said with a smile. His heartbeat increased. He had to get inside that building. Then he thought of it. "Will this do?" he asked while holding up a stack of money. The man didn't have to think long and grabbed the cash forcefully, after which he stepped aside. Going once, going twice sold, Oliver heard when he entered the room. His heart sank through the floor as he saw the painting being sold right before his eyes, in which tears formed. With blurry vision, Oliver looked around the room, trying to figure out who the new owner was. He was so close. From the back of the room, Oliver watched closely what happened with the painting once it left the stage. He noticed it being brought through a door, so he sneaked through it and entered a back room with multiple paintings. Finally, Oliver whispered when he walked toward the painting, but then he got found out. "You're not supposed to be here," the gigantic security guard said when he saw Oliver in the back room. "I want to speak to the owner of this painting." Oliver said. The security guard ignored him and spoke into his walkie-talkie. "Boss, we have a situation in the storage." There was no way out for Oliver. Oliver tried to get the guard to talk, but he simply ignored him and waited for his boss to come. Then the door opened, and a fat man entered the room. "What are you doing here, boy?" he snarled. Oliver told him he wanted to speak to the painting's owner. "You're looking at him." For a moment, Oliver was speechless. This was what he had been working for all these years. He shook his head and explained he was the original owner of the painting, which was stolen from him. "Do you want a stolen painting?" Oliver asked, hopeful, but the response shocked him. "I knew it was stolen. It was an illegal auction after all. I'm not stupid," the boss responded. He continued to say that Oliver should have outbid him if he wanted to have the painting back so badly. I didn't arrive until Oliver started, but then he thought of something. The boss was probably dealing in paintings to earn money. He could offer him something. Maybe we can make a deal then. Oliver asked, hopeful. Before the boss can answer, he continues, I have an even more valuable painting in my possession. The boss seemed interested in this offer, but then hesitated. It looked like the boss wanted to accept, but before words came out of his mouth, he closed it again and thought hard. Why would you trade a more valuable painting for this one? I don't trust this, the boss said while gesturing to the guard to send Oliver away. Let me explain. Oliver shouted. The boss had already started walking away, but suddenly stopped, intrigued by what Oliver would say. The guard let Oliver go so he could speak. My grandfather painted that painting. It has a lot of emotional value for me and my mother. I want it back at all costs. The boss laughed deviously. At all costs. How interesting. You got yourself a deal on one condition. The boss said. Oliver's heart almost leaped outside his chest. Did he do it? What was the condition? We will do it on my terms. Leave your info, the boss snarled. Oliver happily obliged, not realizing it may be a mistake. After leaving his information, Oliver got kicked out of the warehouse, but it didn't matter to him anymore. This was what he was working for all these years. He could taste his victory. His euphoric feeling carried him back home where he realized something. Home, he whispered to himself. I can go home. Oliver hadn't gone home since he left it years ago. He promised his mother he would find the painting and return it to her. Now he was so close to achieving his goal that it would be fitting to go home, right? But when Oliver arrived home, an unwelcoming surprise waited for him. Mom, I'm home, he shouted while entering his childhood home. When he walked into the living room, his mother just hung up the phone. I've come back bearing gifts, Oliver said, enthusiastically approaching his mother for a hug. But to his surprise, she yells at him. Thief. He shouted as police sirens could be heard. What are you doing? Oliver shouted at his mom while she watched him getting dragged away by the police. After everything I've done, I don't get it. He resisted as much as he could, but soon realized this would only worsen things. When the officers explained what was happening, he didn't believe it. You're under arrest for stealing valuable property belonging to your mother, one officer said. Oliver couldn't believe what he was hearing. It caught him by so much surprise, he almost choked on his breath. I did what? He managed to say, your mother filed a report saying you sold a painting to fund your business. What? Oliver's voice echoed through the room. He felt betrayed. His own mother filed a report on him. She believed he was the one who stole the painting. No. I started the business to fund my search for the painting, Oliver said explicitly. But it was no use without pride. I will show you everything, he said before getting all the files needed to prove his business was legit. Over the years, he kept his books clean, and the police realized quickly he didn't sell the painting to fund his company. Oliver sighed deeply, happy he was proven innocent, but now the police were involved. His goal of getting the painting back seemed far away. Oliver may be innocent, but that doesn't mean he is off their radar. He was dealing with criminals to get the painting back. What to do? Oliver mumbled. Then he realized there was just one thing he could do. There is one more thing, though. Oliver confessed, after thinking about it, the most logical thing for him to do was come clean about his deal. I made a deal with an illegal art dealer, he said, while mentally preparing for another interrogation. But he couldn't have prepared for how the officers responded. He expected them to respond aggressively and throw him back into interrogation. But they didn't do that. Instead, they walked out of the room and ignored him. This can't be good, Oliver mumbled to himself. When they came back, they surprised him. What kind of deal? One of them asked. Oliver was momentarily speechless as he tried to process what was happening. What kind of deal? He repeated and then explained how he went to an illegal auction and confronted this boss to make a deal with him. Oliver told them everything in detail, but when he finished, the police surprised him again. He was a fat and bald guy, and he will contact me, Oliver said, but then the police interrupted him. We don't want the boss. We want the thieves, an officer said. Oliver stared at him blankly. The officer saw his facial expression and said, we want to take the root of the problem. Oliver felt his hope leave his body. He didn't know anything about the thieves. I can't help with that, he said dimly, but he didn't realize how wrong he was because the police already thought about the perfect way to help them. You just have to go to me, the officer said. So Oliver sat and waited for the boss to contact him. And when that happened, the police wired him up. Oliver sighed, you can do this, he said, trying to assert his confidence. He drove through the villa's gate with the painting in the back of the van. Let's do this. A lump was in his throat, and Oliver's heart rate skyrocketed when he saw the security guard waiting for him. Oliver took one deep breath and prayed the wires wouldn't be discovered. Good evening, he said with a relieved voice when the guard let him through, not knowing how things would work out. Welcome. The boss greeted him with a big smile. He was ready to deal. Oliver nodded slightly and smiled nervously while pushing the painting inside on a little cart. When they went on to make the trade, the thing Oliver dreaded most happened. The boss double-crossed him. His hope evaporated, but then he realized this was the best thing that could have happened. Due to him wearing wires, the police now got solid evidence, and before he could finish the thought, the officers entered the villa, hands up. Multiple voices shouted, which became hazy moments later. Oliver entered his own world, focused on the paintings. He did it. I finally did it, he said, his voice breaking a little while walking toward the painting. It looked like the world was moving in slow motion. It had been years since he last saw this painting from this close. Oliver smiled widely, running his fingers over the picture frame, but that smile suddenly faded. It can't be. Oliver looked closer, almost touching the canvas with his nose. Then his vision became blurry due to the tears forming in his eyes. The signature of his great-grandfather was forged. It's a fake. He screamed frustratingly, catching the attention of the officers and arrested criminals. I was scammed, the boss said. When they arrived at the police station, Oliver was still processing the turn of events, but the police switched gears instantly. They realized a sudden opportunity uncovered itself. You got scammed by the thieves. Could you tell us something about them? The officers asked the boss, not knowing where this would lead them. It didn't take long for the boss to take a deal and tell everything he knew. So moments later, Oliver accompanied the police to the supposed warehouse of the thieves. But when they arrived, there seemed to be nothing there. They decided to stay for a while, not knowing what they would soon discover. The evening turned into night as the officers and Oliver watched the warehouse. Did the boss lie to us? Oliver whispered to one of the officers, but he gestured to stay silent and pointed. Oliver's heart skipped a beat when he saw where the officer was pointing. Two figures approached the warehouse. It was very dark near the warehouse, but it looked like the two figures had something big with them under a cloth. Ooh, it had to be the painting. Oliver stood up from excitement, but the officer pulled him down immediately. Watch out, the man whispered. They couldn't blow this now. We have to cover all the exits when they are inside, the officer in charge spoke to the others. On his signal, the police raided the warehouse where the two men looked closely at a painting. While the officers were arresting the thieves, Oliver ran over to the painting. This is it, he exclaimed. Oliver was overwhelmed with joy, but when he watched the thieves being handcuffed, he suddenly felt a wave of anger inside him. Were you the ones who stole it? How did you do it? Why? He confronted them, but they didn't respond. Not satisfied with this, Oliver went to the station, hoping for answers. To his surprise, he didn't have to wait very long for answers. Due to the boss's testimony, the police got solid evidence against the thieves, so they confessed quickly. We stole the painting and laid low for a few years, but they didn't account for Oliver, who was obsessively looking out for the painting. With the case finally resolved, Oliver could return to his childhood home. He parked the van out front and rang the doorbell. His mother cried when she saw the paintings and embraced Oliver, not knowing how to apologize to him. Don't worry, Mom. I'm happy we're all together again, he just said.